You're listening to a podcast from the BMA.
Every year, thousands of medical students begin their careers as doctors. It's a stressful, complicated time, but the BMA is on hand to help out. In this presentation, I'll be talking to one of the BMA's employment advisors, Rosie Shaheen, about some of the key things new junior doctors should look out for and some of the ways the BMA can help. So, Rosie, I imagine pay is quite an important issue for new junior doctors. Can you explain how pay works and some of the key things that the BMA can maybe help on?
Yes, well, there are many issues relating to pay which a junior doctor needs to be aware of. The first is that junior doctors are paid on government-agreed NHS pay scales. Each grade has its own pay scales which can be accessed from nhsemployers.org.uk. There are two ways a junior doctor will be paid in each year. The first is by receiving an incremental point, which is a pay increase that you receive for each year completed in the NHS. The value of the increase will depend on where you are in your career, and if you are unsure, you can contact the BMA to seek some advice. Also, each April there is a pay review by government which may result in a further pay rise. Junior doctors are normally paid on the minimum of the pay scale on appointment to a grade. If a junior doctor has previous service which allows enhancement to their existing salary, then the employer should appoint them to a salary reflecting the additional service. What I mean by additional service is if you have done any overseas work, worked as a locum, whether in the NHS or not, or worked in a higher grade, then you may well be entitled to a higher salary. Again, if you are unsure, just contact the BMA to check your current salary is correct. It is really important to get salaries and incremental dates checked by an expert to ensure that you are being paid correctly. By law, if the employer overpays you accidentally, then they can recover the difference. At the same time, if you've been underpaid, you can claim the difference. But do you really want to bother with this? Get your salaries checked by the BMA and avoid the hassle.
OK, well, thanks for that, Rosie. I imagine after pay, annual leave is probably the issue that comes up next for junior doctors. So can you maybe tell us a little bit about that?
Yes, well, annual leave entitlement for junior doctors are shown in this slide. Since junior doctors work more than a standard working week, there can sometimes be confusion as to what constitutes a week's leave in terms of number of days. This has led to employers adopting different ways of calculating annual leave entitlements, such as an employer may class 1 week of leave as 5 or 7 days. Some employers break annual leave down into hours, and some employers even schedule annual leave into the working rota, usually to help manage staffing levels. So it is very important that whenever you start with a new employer, you check what rules apply to annual leave entitlements and familiarise yourself. Where a junior doctor has been unable to take the full allowance of annual leave before the end of the leave year, they are allowed to carry up to 5 days of annual leave into the new year, but this is always subject to the authorisation of the employer. Carryover of leave from one post to another is often a contentious subject and should be agreed in advance with the new employer. The previous employer is responsible for notifying the next employer, although it is best to check with the employer that this has been done. It is important to be aware that most employers will expect that the junior doctor gives a minimum of 6 weeks' notice when wishing to take their annual leave, but again, it's best to check this with the employer at the start of the post.
OK, but how do public holidays fit into annual leave?
Well, full-time junior doctors are entitled to be paid 8 public holidays each year. If you're a part-time employee, you will be entitled to public holidays on a pro-rata basis. A further 2 days, which are known as statutory days, are also given to junior doctors. If a junior doctor is required to be on duty between midnight and 9 a.m. on either the statutory or public holiday, then they should receive a day off in lieu. If they're expected to work during the bank holiday after 9 a.m. the same day, then they should also receive an additional day off in lieu.
So what happens if a junior doctor is ill? How does their leave work in those circumstances?
Well, if a junior doctor is absent from duty owing to illness, injury or a disability, then they should receive sick leave entitlements as shown on this slide. If a junior is incapable of working because of illness, then they should immediately contact the employer as per the employer's sick leave policy, which can be obtained from the HR department or possibly even the local intranet. Again, if you are unsure, speak to the BMA. Furthermore, if you are a BMA member, you can seek additional support from the BMA counselling service called Doctors for Doctors, and contact details are shown on this slide.
Thanks very much for that, Rosie. What would be your top tips then to leave us with for junior doctors?
Well, the first thing is I would certainly recommend that you join the BMA. We can give you help and advice in these areas as well as any other employment area, provided they're not related to clinical matters. And my second top tip is that once you've joined the BMA and you've received your employment contract, that you get your contract checked by the BMA contract checking service, as we can then tell you whether you are on the right pay and receiving the right terms and conditions in accordance with the entitlements you should be receiving.
Well, thank you very much for talking to us today, Rosie. If you need any more information about anything we've been talking about, then you can go to the BMA website and look at bma.org.uk/finals. Alternatively, if you are a BMA member, then feel free to call our support helpline on 0300 123 1233.